This special edition of the Open Soul Podcast was produced by students who participated in our podcast guest training program in October 2024. I'm Michael Riley, host of the Open Soul Podcast. Most of the people whose voices you're hearing today on this special episode had little to no experience doing podcast interviews less than a month before we did these recordings. The in-person training we offer prepares you to become an interesting and engaging guest on any podcast, where you'll be able to inform, entertain, and self-promote after just a few sessions. If you'd like to find out how you can attend one of our podcast guest workshops in the Phoenix area, please contact us by email at opensoulpodcast@gmail.com.
This is the Open Soul Podcast.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Naz coming at you with the next segment of our very special edition of Open Soul Podcast. Today I'm joined by Angela Shelby. Angela is a talented medium as well as what they call a dream interpreter. Angela, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing so good. Thank you for having me today.
That's great. That's great. I love it. Now, I'm excited to ask you a little bit more about what it is that you do, but first I'd like to ask you about yourself. Where do you live? What's your favorite color? Are you a dog person or cat person? What are your passions? Let the people know.
I live in Buckeye, Arizona. I have a small chihuahua named Mavis. She is my right-hand gal. My favorite color is blue.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. This is important because I'm going to bring these back later. I'd like to ask you to begin about your mediumship. I kind of want to ask, what your background is in regards to that. Like, when did you first learn that you were spiritual? Where are you from? And how did that affect your relationship with spirituality?
I grew up in a very Catholic school, Catholic grandparents. My mom wasn't particularly religious, but I spent the first 9 years of my life being taught by little nuns. So God was, all pervasive in everything. And I always kind of had an awareness every now and then of my angels and things as a kid. As I grew up, it kind of went away, and then I got into energy healing during my nursing career from a friend. And the more I did it, the more I opened up. And one day I was working on a woman, and as an energy healer, I usually have my eyes closed. I'm usually in the zone, and I just happened to open my eyes, and I looked around, and I was like, there's more hands here than my hands. Where did these hands come from? I'm like, I am the only person in here. And that it was this woman's spirit guide, and that it just kept going from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And so you learned that at a very young age, rather.
At a very young age, yeah.
Okay, incredible.
Yeah.
And so how would you say that affected your youth growing up?
God was just always been a part of it. I wanted to be a nun when I was in kindergarten. For the first 4 or 5 years old, I was going to be a nun when I grew up. I really admired my mom's mom, my grandma. And then I fell in love with an 8th grader, and I found out nuns couldn't have boyfriends. And I was like, this is not going to fly.
Total deal
I'm going to have
breaker.
to find another way.
Yeah.
This isn't going to work for me. But God's always been important. Even though I let religion go, but God's always been important.
I love that. That's powerful. Okay, so allow me to ask you about your mediumship. For those who don't know, first of all, what even is mediumship? What does it mean to be a medium?
Mediumship is basically communication with beings on the other side or in different dimensions. That's the broad real definition of mediumship. What most people equate mediumship with is speaking with deceased loved ones, or people that have been incarnated on Earth and then died and crossed over. But mediumship also means talking to spirit guides. It also means talking to ETs, all of that stuff. So when I say mediumship, I mean it in the broadest sense. When I give a mediumship reading, spirit guides always show up. But I don't want to call it a spirit guide reading because deceased loved ones show up. I mean, I don't know who's going to show up. That's part of the fun. Elementals show up. There are beings I didn't even know existed, and they show up. I'm learning all the time.
Wow.
It's a really mixed bag, and actually, it's a lot of fun. I love my job. I think it's the best job ever.
That's great.
Yeah.
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 So when it comes to being a medium, I know that this isn't necessarily something that you can learn in college, right? So would you say that you're mostly self-taught, or do you have any role models that played a big part in your up and coming as a medium?
A lot, actually. So my first role models were nuns. I was taught I could pray, I could talk to God. I I was always taught that. I used to sit on my barn roof and watch sunsets, and I didn't know that was meditating, but boy, did I connect. That was like the best thing ever. Um, but I met a life coach who was also, she had a psychology background and she was incredibly spiritual. And I found her in a time in my life where I really needed her. And she has been my life coach for over 15 years now and my mentor. I learned a lot from her, still do. She's about to retire, which sucks. But yeah, and I've had other teachers. The Acorn Academy of Mediumship, Tina Escoto. There's all sorts of great teachers. I learned from my friends. I learned from people I interviewed on this podcast. I mean, there's always something. It's always coming in. It's always changing. That's the other cool part about being a medium, or I guess any job in life, but always learning, always changing. It's never stagnant. It never holds still.
So you're constantly being motivated. You constantly
Constantly.
have new influences and new role models that you look up to.
Constantly. I learn from my friends. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's great. What is something that you would say makes you different from your other, your next average medium? Like, what's something that people could get from you that they might not necessarily get if they went to a different medium?
I think what makes mediums unique is their filters, their perspectives on life and how they deliver information, but also all the gifts that they combine together. So I'm an energy healer. I'm a medium. I'm a psychic. I'm also a dream interpreter. And all of that comes together when I do readings or when I work with anybody. It's like people, when they see visions or images, that's how spirit often talks. Images, a picture speaks 1,000 words. It's multi-layered information in one snapshot. Dreams are the same way. And so my dream interpretation really comes in handy when interpreting visions from spirit that other people have or that they show me. When I'm doing a dream interpretation, spirit will talk to me. Guides will also click in. It all, oozes into each other.
Absolutely, yeah,
It's
yeah.
a spiritual osmosis. It just all combines. It all comes together.
This is Naz, and I'm having a lovely talk with Angela Shelby about her mediumship, as well as what is referred to as dream interpretation. Now, Angela, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about what that is and what that means. What is dream interpretation?
Dream interpretation, well, a dream is basically your conscious mind, your unconscious mind talking to your conscious mind. So your mind, 10% of it is conscious, which is you and me getting up every day, living our lives. The other 90% of our mind is unconscious, which means it happens, behind the scenes. Our unconscious mind is massive. It's our best friend. It knows everything we've ever done. It absorbs all the information we've ever come across, knows us like nobody else. And so when it talks, it is always talking for our best interest. And that's why dreams are awesome. A dream is basically this important communication from your unconscious mind, letting you know that something is bothering you or there's important information for you that will make your life easier. And it's attempting to communicate that with you. But unconscious speaks in pictures. It speaks in pictures and feelings. And it's his whole language. I call them life hacks because one single dream it will show you something that's bothering you weren't aware of. It will tell you why it's important, and then it will give you the solution. And it will all be in the same dream. And the dream could be 5 images, and that's it. I mean, I started when I was 14. I've been doing it for 30 years, and it still blows me away. And I even have my moments where I'm like, I'm tired. I don't want to interpret this. I'm sure it's important. And if it's really important, I'll get nagged about it, and they keep flashing the dream at me, my guides do, and so I'll sit down, and then I pull it apart, and I'm like, I'm so glad I did this. I'm not the same person I was an hour ago before this dream.
Wow.
Like, I am changed.
That's powerful.
It is. it's crazy, and people have them all the time, and they just don't realize what they have. Yeah.
So in other words, I guess it could be said that life would be a lot easier in general if people just started paying attention to their dreams more.
Yes, well, and it's not only the unconscious mind. Spirit slips in through the back door of the unconscious mind. So, when you go to sleep at night, your walls come down. So if Spirit's been trying to get through to you and hasn't been able to get through your walls, it sneaks in while you're sleeping.
Right.
So dreams can be visits from Spirit. Deceased relatives sneak in during dreams. So when you have a dream where it's like, I was speaking with my mom, she's been dead for like 10 years now, but we were just sitting at the kitchen table. I don't even remember what we talked about, but we were just eating and laughing, and it was just nice. They were coming to visit you. You had a visit from that family member. So again, and it really breaks my heart when people go, it was a dream about my mom, and I don't even know what it was. We were just, don't even remember what it was. We were just at the table, and it was nothing. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. That she visited you. She gave you the gift. She wants you to know she's there. So, yeah, that's my soapbox on that. I get pretty impassioned about the whole dream thing.
You sound passionate, and I love that. I love that. That makes you a powerful dream interpreter for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. One thing that I did really want to ask you is that you mentioned you were a nurse.
Yes.
So how does having the gifts that you carry affect your position as a nurse in the medical industry?
It helps me behind the scenes, but I do not advertise it.
Right.
I feel it's a conflict of interest because I have my own business, and I don't want people to think I am using my patients for my own business, for one thing. Another thing is I am dealing with people at a very vulnerable time in their lives, and so I don't bring up anything that might rock their boat, whether I think they should know about it or not. As with anything, I think it's important we meet people where they are at. And 99% of my patients are not ready to hear that I hear dead people and I speak to their guides.
Right.
Every now and then I'm given an open door, and I know I'm supposed to say something, but I do not say anything unless Spirit gives me a nudge in the ribs. But the great part is I can send healing energy to anybody. And if somebody doesn't want that energy, they won't absorb it. Their spirit won't take it. So I can throw healing at anybody. I can ask my guides, what do I do about this? She's out of her head right now. What do I do with this poor woman? And I will get advice. I will get help. They help me take care of my patients. But I don't advertise what I do. I'm definitely a closet psychic when I am doing my nursing.
Wow. That's incredible, and you're such a powerful woman, and I really appreciate taking the time to talk to you today. Now, we met at the Place of Spiritual Wisdom, and so I wanted to ask you really quick about what are some of the classes that you offer there, if any, and also how can some people get in touch with you if they're looking for a dream interpretation or following your mediumship abilities?
I really love the Place of Spiritual Wisdom. I teach dream interpretation classes here intermittently right now. It's been kind of sporadic. But it's a really great place to just come and experience a lot of different things at super reasonable prices and figure out what you like and what you don't, what works for you. And, what does work for you, you take it and you leave the rest behind. But you can come learn about tarot for $10 and have different teachers and meet lots of awesome people. If you would like to get a hold of me, the best way was through my website, actually. It's www.angelashelby.com. And my name or my address and phone number are on there. I work out of my home, but I also do long distance and via Zoom. So
Great.
Yeah.
Really quick, words of the wisdom for the people. Go. What you got?
Boy, that's a good one. Love is the only thing that really matters, and that's really, really hard to remember, especially when we are dealing with ourselves. I think some of the hardest people to love are ourselves. And love. Love is all that really, truly matters.
Incredible. Angela, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I'd like to thank our listeners for joining us on this next segment of this special edition of the Open Soul Podcast. Angela, thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
You're listening to the Open Soul Podcast.